Welcome to AP Environmental Science. In this video, we are going to briefly discuss ocean warming and some of the causes and impacts associated with that. Now, ocean warming is an increase in that global ocean average temperatures, but keep in mind this is not uniform or the same all over the globe. In fact, the areas near the Arctic are actually warming faster than the areas near the equator. And this kind of makes sense when we think about those global ocean patterns and the global ocean currents. Also, keep in mind that warm water is going to hold less dissolved oxygen, and warm water takes up a little bit more space, called thermal expansion. Now, if we look at this graph on the slide, we can see that over the past several years, the average temperature of the oceans has increased pretty substantially. Now we can look at that visually here on the map, and this is where we can see that land and ocean temperature departure from normal, which essentially means if we take the 1981 to 2010 temperatures and average them out, and then we look at 2019, how far off are we from that average? And we can see that it's quite a bit warmer in the ocean near the poles. And yes, there are a few land areas that are a little bit colder, but we are seeing this trend towards warmer temperatures throughout the globe. Now, this ocean warming is, of course, caused by an increase in greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, primarily from carbon dioxide and methane. And you can see that in the graph here, that the green line is the carbon dioxide in parts per million. But that blue line is that ocean heat content, and this is looking at the anomaly or that departure from normal. So we can see that as the amount of carbon dioxide has increased, that ocean temperature has increased as well. And in fact, oceans have actually absorbed about 93% of the excess heat that's trapped by greenhouse gases since the 1970s. So if we didn't have the oceans, we would have seen much more substantial increases in global average temperature. Now, this is due to a phenomenon called ocean heat lag. So when we have those greenhouse gases radiating more heat towards the planet, and that's due to those industrial and fossil fuel emissions, that heat is going to be absorbed by the oceans, and that heat is then distributed through those global ocean currents around the globe. And these oceans slowly release that heat back into the planet's surface, and that warms the planet from the ocean. Now, this transfer of heat takes much longer than that initial transfer that would happen on land. So it takes about 30 to 50 years from the heat from those greenhouse gas emissions to really start registering due to this ocean heat lag. Now, we're also going to see sea level rise as a result of this ocean warming. So having more greenhouse gas emissions leads to rising sea levels, primarily due to these melting ice sheets and this thermal expansion or ocean water expansion. So when we look at the driving factors that are leading to this sea level rise, we can see that thermal expansion takes up about a third of that increase in sea level. So as we're heating this ocean water, the ocean water is expanding, and that's going to impact the coastal communities. But we're also having those warmer temperatures on the surface of the earth, which is causing those ice sheets to melt, which is contributing to additional water in the ocean. So we have this multiple factors that are increasing our global sea level. Having these changes in the ocean temperature are going to lead to several impacts on marine species, and there's four main categories of these. First of all, with habitat loss, we're going to see less sea ice, which means there's less hunting and feeding area, so that's going to alter these predator-prey interactions. Oftentimes the predator species are not going to get enough food, and we'll start to see their populations declining, but those prey species also rely on the surface sea ice, and that's typically relying on it for things like breeding and grounds and area to kind of raise their young. These rising sea levels are also going to alter coastlines, and they'll change the location of the photic zone, and we talked about that in another video. And these warming oceans are going to alter that primary productivity in phytoplankton. Remember, phytoplankton are responsible for about half of the oxygen that is circulating in the atmosphere. So if we did not have all this photosynthesis from those phytoplankton, we would not be able to breathe on the earth. Some of the impacts on the metabolism of these organisms include these migrating species might struggle to find cold enough waters in order to meet their life needs. That warming ocean is also going to push a lot of these organisms to their thermal limits. So remember our range of tolerance discussion from earlier in the year. So warmer water means that the metabolism of these creatures are increasing, and that means that they need to get more food in order to survive. Again, warm water holds less oxygen, and this can also reduce the life expectancy of these species, so an increase in mortality, and we're also going to see declines in reproduction. So our reproductive changes when you have thermal stress, the organism is weakened, so you have less reproduction. And many marine organisms require specific ocean temperatures in order to meet certain reproductive milestones. So sometimes temperature dictates the time that organisms mate. They determine the time when eggs can hatch or larvae can survive in certain stages of their life cycle. Finally, these impacts on marine species can lead to coral bleaching. Now, corals are this symbiotic relationship, and corals have these algae that live inside of their bodies. So the algae provides food for the coral, and the coral provides that structure for the algae to live, and this algae is what gives the coral their unique colors. So when you have warming ocean temperatures, that puts stress on the corals, and when the corals are stressed, they actually push the algae out of them, so they expel this algae, and that causes the coral to look white or bleached in appearance. Now, corals can survive a bleaching event if it is not going to persist for a long period of time. So if the temperature increases briefly, but then is rather quickly followed by cooler temperature, that coral can survive and reclaim the algae, so to speak, or form new mutualistic relationships and then continue surviving. But if those warm temperatures hang around for too long, that coral is going to die without having that algae that provides the food. Now, in summary, you should be able to explain some of the causes and effects of warming ocean temperatures. Remember, the causes are these increases in greenhouse gases, particularly carbon dioxide and methane, and those greenhouse gas concentrations are going to lead to warmer temperatures. Now, the effects of this is going to lead to habitat loss, metabolic and reproductive changes, and coral bleaching. Again, please leave your questions here at the end, and I hope that as you watch this video, you were able to learn something.